Today, we are diving deep into a crisis that's pushing the world to a boiling point. We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz, where tensions are escalating so fast, the entire world is literally holding its breath. Okay, let's just start right here. This is not some stuffy diplomatic memo. No, this was a direct warning broadcast right from an Iranian naval vessel in the strait itself. It's a crystal clear message, and you can probably guess who the idiots part was aimed at. This really sets the defiant tone for the entire standoff. And believe me, the stakes could not possibly be higher. Think about this. About a fifth of the entire world's oil supply has to pass through this one narrow waterway. So a fight here, that's not just some regional squabble. It's a direct threat to the entire global economy. So how in the world did we get here? Let's take a look at who the key players are and what their absolute non-negotiables were. You know, this slide really captures the heart of the deadlock perfectly. On one hand, you had the Trump administration using what it called maximum pressure, basically tough economic blockades and military posturing to try and force Iran to the table. But on the other hand, for Iran, the idea of negotiating while under that kind of threat, well, that was an absolute non-starter, a red line they just would not cross. And this whole thing went way beyond just words, and it happened fast. First, the U.S. seizes an Iranian cargo ship, the Tosca. Iran's response? It's immediate, a drone strike on a U.S. warship. Then, Iran's Revolutionary Guard fires warning shots at Indian tankers, sending a clear message: nobody gets through. And finally, Iran deploys its missiles, putting the entire region on a hair-trigger alert. You can see how every single move and countermove just pushed everyone closer and closer to an all-out war. This quote from one of the source analyses we looked at really sums up the whole mindset described in the material. I mean, after decades of sanctions and all this international pressure, the viewpoint being presented is one of pure resilience and defiance. The analysis basically says that from their perspective, they've been through these storms before and they're ready to do it again. So let's talk about the ripple effect, because a conflict like this is never just contained to one spot on the map. It sent massive shockwaves through the entire global economy, affecting everything from how much you pay for gas to how the stock market behaves. The very first thing everyone felt was the hit to oil prices. The second the strait was closed, boom, prices skyrocketed past $90 a barrel. And the analysis in the reports warned it could get much worse, potentially hitting $120 or even $200, which would almost certainly trigger a global recession. And this is the key thing. These aren't just abstract numbers on a screen. The real-world pain was immediate. You had reports coming out of India describing severe fuel and fertilizer shortages. Global stock markets absolutely plummeted as investors panicked. And then there was this potentially massive shift. Some Gulf nations, just totally exhausted by the conflict, started talking openly about trading their oil in the Chinese yuan. That's a direct challenge to the dominance of the US dollar. Okay, so with the world economy on the edge and military tensions just through the roof, a third party decided to step in. All eyes suddenly turned to Islamabad as Pakistan tried to step in, mediate a truce, and pull these two sides back from the brink. And just look at this timeline. It shows you just how incredibly fragile the whole situation was. After days of really intense talks, Iran makes this huge concession. They reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It felt like a massive breakthrough. But then, less than 24 hours later, President Trump announces a full U.S. blockade of that exact same waterway. From the Iranian point of view, it felt like a total betrayal. Trust just evaporated, and they immediately slammed the strait shut all over again. And this really gets to the core of the problem, right? The skepticism from Iran, as our sources describe it, was just off the charts. The viewpoint was that they felt like they were being lured into a trap, being asked to talk about peace while at the exact same time getting hit with even more pressure. The collapse of those talks wasn't just a diplomatic failure. No, according to the analysis we've been looking at, it's a symptom of something way bigger, a historic shift in the entire balance of global power. For decades, American military tech was seen as basically untouchable. But this conflict, according to the analysis, just shattered that idea. You had reports alleging that Iranian drones and missiles were actually compromising some of the best U.S. and Israeli systems out there. We're talking about the F-35, the most advanced fighter jet in the world, and even the Iron Dome, Israel's supposedly unbeatable missile defense shield. And here's the other thing. Iran isn't standing alone in this. The analysis points to critical support from two other major world powers, China and Russia. In fact, One report even cited China's defense minister publicly supporting Iran's control over the strait. This completely changes the game from a one-on-one dispute to a real showdown between powerful alliances. So, when you put all of these pieces together, the reports suggest we're watching a truly historic moment unfold. Since the Cold War ended, we've basically lived in a unipolar world, dominated by one superpower. But this conflict, according to this perspective, is a flashing red light that a much more complex, multipolar world with several different centers of power is starting to emerge. And that leaves us with this one final, really provocative question. Does this conflict, where economic power, military tech, and global alliances were all put to the test, truly mark a turning point in history? What does this crisis in the Strait of Hormuz really tell us about the future of power in the 21st century?